fun thing about talking about knowing your audience to a Toastmasters audience is that I know you know this stuff. So I'm going to ask for a little interactivity here. The first thing you need to know about your audience are some basic demographics, and I'm going to list them up here. And I'm going to ask you why these various things are important. The first one is age range. Why do you care how old your audience is? Oh, come on, I know you know this. Susan.
Appropriate material.
Very true. You're not going to talk to... You're not going to talk to... Please don't do that during a speech.
It was her, not me.
Okay. But this is videotaping, so... You don't want to say something to a teen audience that you would to an adult audience. So, yes, you need to know your age range. Who are you talking to? And also, things you might say to an audience in their 30s is going to be completely different than you're going to speak to an audience in their 80s. So, age range is important. The next is male to female ratio. Why is that important? Why do you care how many males or females are in your audience? Lee.
Different life experiences and concerns.
Exactly. There are things you're going to talk about in a female audience that you wouldn't talk about in a male audience, and vice versa. In addition, stories are going to be a part of your speech. If you're talking to an all-female audience and your stories are all about men, they're not going to be able to relate. So you need to tailor your speech to the people who are in your audience. The stories you tell need to relate to the people in your audience. Another thing you need to know is the occupation and economic status. Why is that important? Why do you care how much money your audience makes? Why do you care? Anyone? Seba.
Well, I guess if you're selling something, hopefully they'll be able to buy what it is that you're selling.
That is one good reason. There are other reasons. One would be including what their knowledge base is. When you know someone's occupation or economic status, you have it's not exact, but you have a general idea of what their education is, how much they're going to know about the topic you're talking about, and you're going to know a little bit about their jargon, so you can use language that will reflect something that they understand. Another thing you need to know, obviously, is the educational background. Again, why would that be important? Why do you care how much education that your audience has had? Eric.
Same reason, you just know how to speak to them.
Right. If I'm talking to a group of PhDs, I can up-level my language. If I'm talking to a bunch of, longshoremen, I'm not going to use as big words. You got to know your audience, you know how to talk to them. Now here's one that for me, I can't even spell it. Political orientation. Why do you care what the politics of the room are? Eric?
If you're speaking to Republicans, don't say something like, I love government, I love big government, and stuff like that.
That is, yeah. And if you're talking to a Democratic audience, you're not going to go Mitt Romney! Yeah. And there are other reasons too, because there's other types of politics. How liberal, how conservative, but also some audiences aren't going to be political at all. So you can be a little bit more free about what you talk about. And some audiences it's going to be a real sticking point. So you need to watch what you say so that you don't offend them. And finally, this is not necessarily as important, but what are their leisure activities? Knowing your audience's leisure activities is important. Why? Jennifer.
If you're giving a presentation and you have a story that you have involved, you can relate to them by one of the leisure activities that they all have in common.
Exactly. So these are all types of things that you can research and learn about your audience so that you can tailor your speech so that it is more appropriate to them. If you're speaking your audience's language, they're going to engage with you. They're going to understand you. So knowing your audience is really important, and these are the types of things you're going to need to know. Now, once you know your audience, there are going to be a few things that you need to keep in mind so that you can further engage them. And here are some things that you're going to just need to think about. One is acoustics of the room. You want to know the acoustics of the room because do you need a mic? What kind of mic are you going to use? Are you going to need to project your voice really loudly to get to the back of the room? Or can you talk more normal, more conversational? Acoustics of the room is really important so that you know how much you need to project not only your voice but your emotions because how far back they are. You also need to know the seating. Are you going to be in a round so your audience is all around you and you need to know that you need to reach everyone so you're going to need to turn around? Are we in a business type setting like we are now where I just stand in the front of the room and I talk to people around a table? Or is it theater style where people are way like this and I'm going to have to really project to the back of the room? So seating is important. Lighting. That one you don't often think about, but it's really important. And this particular one became really important to me when I did my audition at Speakers Bureau. I was using PowerPoint slides, and the lighting in the room was well lit. No one could see my PowerPoint slides because they were washed out. So understand the lighting in your room because if you're in a situation like this, you're either going to have to adjust your speech so that you don't need your PowerPoint slides, or you're going to need to change your PowerPoint slides so that they are easier to see in the lighting. Another reason why you need to know about lighting is the audience going to be darkened and you're going to be brightly lit? That's important because you're going to have to engage them more. Because if they're in the dark, they're going to fall asleep. At least some of them are. I've been in that audience and I have fallen asleep on people, even people I wanted to hear. So, you need to know lighting. Here's another one that's a sticking point for especially women, because women tend to be run cold compared to men. Temperature. Are you going to be able to control the temperature of the room? If so, great. If you aren't, you're going to need to adjust how you give your presentation for the temperature of the room. And what do I mean by that? Well, if it's a really warm room, your audience is probably going to be nodding off. So you're going to need to get them engaged, have more activities, get them engaged mentally so that they don't fall asleep. And if they're cold, you're also going to need to do that because some people fall asleep when they're cold. I do. If it gets too cold, I'm out like a light. I'm also out like a light when it's hot, so I have to have the temperature just right. Outside noise. Are you going to have to deal with some really loud event happening right outside the room? So you're going to have to think about this. How are you going to get people paying attention to you rather than the shouting and the singing and the whatever's going on in the next room? Also, if there's a lot of ambient noise, it's going to affect how loud you speak, how you project what you have to say. And then there are tons of other distractions. For example, let's say you're giving a presentation in someone's home. Their cats and dogs could be distracting. Their kids could be distracting. If you're speaking in an outside area, other people enjoying their outside activities could be distracting. Airplanes going over. Always be aware of your surroundings so you know what will be distracting your audience and you can counteract that in some way. Oops. Yep. Another set of things that you need to know to keep your audience attention is time of day. Now, why do you think knowing what time of day you're speaking is important to a speaker? Anyone? I bet some of you know this.
Hunger.
Hunger.
Energy level.
Energy level. Perfect. And related to hunger, if you're the speaker right after lunch, you know darn well that most of them ate poultry. So they've got a lot of tryptophan. and they're going to be falling asleep. So if you're an after meal speaker, you're going to need to be more energetic. You're going to need to get your audience going. If you're the first speaker in the morning, if you're the first speaker on the first day, great. People are there, they're engaged. If you're the first speaker after the nighttime party that the event held, you're going to be dealing with people who probably have hangovers or not enough sleep. So keep those things in mind. Be aware if you're in a multi-speaker event, are there other activities happening at the same time? Are people thinking of the event they just went to, the next one they're going to go to? Is there an event that might be more interesting in the next room that they can get up and leave? Think of those things. And if you're giving a really long presentation, will you be able to give breaks? And if you're giving breaks, where in your presentation do you want to stop for a break? Plan those ahead so that you come to a good stopping point. And make that stopping point a cliffhanger. So that when people go on their break, they want to come back afterwards. You don't lose them. So now you know what you need to know about your audience. You know how to engage them. How do you find out all this information? Does anybody have some ideas? How do you find out all the information I just covered? Well, let me tell you. You scan publications. Does the organization you're speaking for have a publication? You can look at their publication. That will tell you a little bit about the information they like to know. If there's officers in that association, contact them, talk to them. They know their organization. Do you have other references? Maybe there's information about the organization online. Have you been able to find other speakers who have spoken to that audience? If they didn't know advance going in, they certainly have experienced that audience and they can give you some tips. And better yet, talk to people who are members of that audience. And if you can't do that ahead of time, come a little early. Mingle. Talk with the locals. Take some time to kind of get to know your audience. Now, every speech has 4 basic objectives, and they all dovetail together. These objectives include inform. That means you're telling people something they don't already know. You're letting them know something new. You want to inspire. Most presentations, you're trying to get somebody to take an action, to change some activity that they're doing. You're inspiring them to take action. You're also probably persuading. You're trying to get them to see things a new way. And finally, every speech does this last one. Entertain. If your speech is not entertaining, then people are going to disengage, they're going to just not pay attention, they're going to fall asleep, they're going to think about what they want to eat next meeting. So, every presentation you give, regardless of what the dominant purpose is, needs to have a little bit of all these 4 things. And finally, once you know who you're going to talk to, where you're going to be talking to them, and how you want to incorporate these 4 things into your speech, you need to come up here in front of the room and be knowledgeable. People need to think you know your stuff. You need to be confident. I know my stuff. And you need to have positive energy. No one wants to come to a presentation where the person goes, my topic really sucks, and I don't really want to share it with you, but I have to. No, you need to be, yes, what I have to talk about today rocks! Be positive, be exciting. And when you do those 3 things, you will make your audience speaker friendly. Mr. Toastmaster.